So there we go. So welcome back, everyone. My name is Wolfe, as you can see, and I'm here today with Henrik de Gyor, new friend of mine. Met a couple weeks ago online, as many of us have. We've met a lot of new connections. We're going to be talking about remote work today, and appreciate you being here. Before we get there, just want to bring up a couple things. In about 2 hours, just a few minutes, less than 2 hours, I'm doing a webinar. It's first of a 4-part series about the future of employment. We're going to be hitting on that a little bit today about remote work, but we're going to be talking a lot more about the future of employment, job skills, the labor market, what unemployment, how we're going to get out of this mess. But my guest is Dr. Ed Gordon. He's written 20+ books. He's been studying the labor market and the future of work for over 30 years. And this is sort of his time. A lot of things he was predicting have come true almost overnight. So we're going to be talking a lot about that over a 4-part series. And today we're going to be talking about how to expecting the unexpected, which certainly our world. You can get to that. Let me just see here. Chief cook and bottle washer, as usual today. Here's the link. I'll keep that up a little bit while I bring down the screen. But if you're interested, we still have some seats left. There is limited seating. You have to register, but you can click on that link and it'll take you to the registration. So hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of that. And the other thing is, I put together quite a few resources. I've been sharing those on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and some of the webinars and seminars. But I've got over a dozen, so it got tough to share all those links. So I put it on a single page. You can get to that page by going to bit.ly, free-resources-2020. You can actually get a copy of two of my books. One is Recruiting in the Age of Globalization. The other is Remote Employee Blueprint. That one's downloadable, and it's free. But there's a number of other resources, some online courses, our community podcast, and more live streams like what we're going to get into right now. So I hope you'll be able to take advantage of those. So let's hide that and bring back Henrik. So our conversation a couple weeks ago, I can't remember exactly how we connected, but it might have been about remote work or just about change or the environment. But you've been basically with digital asset management, which was what your path was. You've been remote and virtual for a long time. And you had a great statement. I'm probably going to screw it up, but basically is your thing was if you don't have to physically move it or make it, there's no reason to have to show up in a workplace other than work remote, wherever that might be.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. If you don't have to create something or move a physical object for work, there's no reason to go to a physical workplace. Like everything else can be done remotely, everything.
Right.
And we've proven it in the last few months with what has happened.
Right. I mean, we certainly shattered the myths. You know, there are all these myths that people couldn't be productive, and that still has to flesh out. But again, considering that people were sent home overnight, maybe with a laptop, maybe not. Things even as simple as bandwidth. Well, as simple as where do I work at home? Because before the kids would go off to school, the spouse went off to school, and you had the run of the house or the run of the apartment, if you're living in the city. And all of a sudden, overnight, you had 4, 5, 6 people, sometimes in-laws, sometimes friends moving in with you. And, I've seen some really creative places. Somebody said, well, I guess I'll be working out of my closet for a while. They removed everything but one shelf that was, that they were able to put things in. I saw somebody working off an ironing board. You've had your kids, your cats, on interviews. But overnight we did pretty well. And considering where the economy is horrible from an unemployment standpoint, but, not the stock market runs everything, but, business different than 2008 and 9/11, which we were obviously both around for. Things just stopped. Everything came to a screeching halt. At this point, part of the economy was still going. And
all the remote workers were basically.
Yeah, well, and some who weren't remote.
True. That too. Yeah.
The hospitals. So it's a very, very interesting economy, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit more at the 2:00 webinar. Is that there are jobs that are truly essential and they're going to thrive, and what are the skill sets? And then there's a lot of companies that just said, we realize we don't need real estate and we don't need all these people. We thought we couldn't do it, but we're not making as much money as we did, but we got half the people, which has always been the biggest payroll. So a little bit different subject there. But as far as going remote, you sent me a survey yesterday. I thought, and you said it was interesting, and I thought it was interesting as well, because I thought it was on the high side. So maybe it was the people that are participating in it, but it was the last I looked at it was 70% of the people said that after this is over, whatever that means, after this is over, 70% said they prefer to work remotely.
Yeah, permanently.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
which is a pretty strong preference. Even if it's 50%, even if it's 25%, that's a significant amount of people that, and this is what you and I were talking about a couple weeks ago. They're off the roadways. They don't need they don't need an office. The businesses around those offices aren't going to have as many people buying lunch and buying coffee. So kind of what's your sense with that? I know you have a pretty strong feeling toward, and that's what I really like to talk about, is we talk about how do you work from home, but there's a lot of people doing that. But what are the implications of any percentage that just continues to stay at home?
Yeah. So a lot of the people I've spoken to in the last several months, they are working from home for obvious reasons, and unless they have to physically move things again. So if they're delivery people, if they work at a grocery store, if they work at a warehouse or factory of some sort, right? Then there's not really have a choice, right? If photographers, they still have to move a camera, right? It's not going to take its pictures by itself. So all those are physical tasks that are not options for remote work. Everyone else is. And the implications are basically all that office space that we had to justify the commercial real estate spend for is going to come to a screeching halt or be minimized significantly. Like on a conservative note, probably 50%. On a less conservative note, probably about 20% of what we use now. So not the brick and mortar stores, right? But I'm talking about office space, commercial office space, where you and I might be meeting, or we might have a cubicle farm, right? Those days are pretty much over. And some people are still clinging to the idea that, oh, well, we have to meet in a meeting room. It's like, so you're going to social distance in a meeting room. You're going to social distance in the elevator. You're going to social distance in your cube farm. Those aren't options anymore. And even after COVID is under control, let's assume that's whenever that is, we don't know, because there may be a wave or two after this in the coming months, for all we know. We don't know, honestly. But the challenge is, after that, we've already justified the fact that, do we really need to commute? Do we really need to go back to traffic? Does it miss you? Do you miss traffic? I don't think so. Do you miss going to lunch in a crowded space? Do you miss fighting for parking? Like, why even subject yourself and waste time commuting and traveling for all of those things when you don't need to? You really don't need to do any of those things. You could be infinitely more efficient removing that entire thing from your agenda, from things that you need to do on a daily basis, aside from maybe take the kids to school or wherever they go. In that perspective, there's not a bus that takes them there, right? Beyond that, you don't need to commute anymore. So if you're an office worker and you're not moving physical objects, you can be part of the distributed workforce of today, which is very thriving. And there are many companies that have been that way since day one. I would highly recommend amongst your resources, take a look also at distributed.blog. Distributed, the podcast, which was started by Matt Mullenweg, the founder of Automatic, which is basically WordPress as we know it. He has over 1,200 people in 60 plus countries. None of them work in an office. So it's very, very possible to run a large company or a small company with remote workers. And you don't need to meet physically, person to person, and have one-on-ones beyond this, right? One-on-ones is now this, and a group discussions is now this. And you get things done, and you have an agenda prior to. You understand what's going to be discussed or what the message is going to be to convey, if it doesn't need to be just an email, right? And move on with the work that needs to be done. And you have a lot more focus time instead of pretending that you're going to focus amongst the cube farm, right? Because that's not going to work.
So, I mean, so there's a lot, you said a lot there, and there were two thoughts, and hopefully I can remember both of them at the same time. I have more trouble with that lately. So two things. One is the interaction part, and I've heard that over and over again, and I see this so many comments about that. We're humans. We need social contact. We need that interface. We need that touching. And, you know, whether that's an introvert or an extrovert talking, whether we want to simplify it as far as that, you know, I can argue both sides of it, but I see the need to physically be there. And there are certainly events, and again, maybe more social type interaction. You know, we had 5 weddings coming up, like family weddings in August and September. And now everybody's wrestling with that. You know, some are long distances. We have to travel. People say, I'd love to be there, but I don't know about flying. I don't know about staying in the hotel. A lot of the relatives are over 60, you know, so there's all these things going on. But some of those things also take place at work. So there's 2 aspects which I'd like to, you know, talk with you a little bit about. One is it just our personal biases that are saying, hey, we need that physical interaction to be effective? Or is it reality? I mean, is there still going to be a need to be in a physical space to do certain things beyond making a product, or as you said? But the other part of that is, which I sort of lost the train of thought. So we'll stick with that, and that'll come back. Let's talk about human interaction. Is the human interaction the physical? Is there a real need for us to physically be in place, or is it just because we've been trained for all these years that was the only option we had?
Right. So we were conditioned that way, right? To in order to do our work, our culture is to work together in a space, right? And that's what we've been conditioned to do. I mean, there's a well-known person who is the father of project management, who said in the 90s that the office was obsolete, but we didn't accept that because we wanted to continue with the status of the office. Like, oh, our offices are in Manhattan or big metro area X.
What do you do if you don't have the big corner office, and you're stuck in the basement in a crawl space, sharing it with your, you know, with your spouse and your kids, right?
Right. So the cachet of having an office is probably pretty close to dead, right? Because like, that's nice. You had an office in the past. Okay, that's good for you. But back to your physical interaction question, there's a few things that are better done in groups, but whether they need to be and will be accepted to be done in groups in the future is a different question. So one of the things is actually asking for money, like fundraising. Supposedly that's done better in meetings, closed-knit meetings, right? And it's much harder to do when it's not in person, supposedly. Whether that's going to change in the near future for fundraising, whether you're a startup, whether you're raising money for a variety of other things, that's to be questioned right nowadays, because most of the people who are going to be funding it are going to be on the older side, typically, and they may not be maybe at the at-risk crowd, right, where traveling for them is probably dangerous to one degree or another, or it's just another waste of time. And like, why should I drive 2 hours to your office to have a half-hour or hour conversation and then drive back 2 hours in traffic? It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So it's still time-consuming to do this. And I don't think it's necessarily worth it, because, and it's not about being a people person, honestly, either. So let's assume that you love being a people person. Let's assume you're an extrovert. I'm an extrovert, and I love speaking with people, not just to people, right? And the challenge is I have to do it this way, and I'm getting used to it constantly, because I would love to talk to a crowd at a conference, but there are no conferences. They're only virtual now. And that's okay. It costs less to do it, and you don't have to travel there, and you don't have to waste a ton of money, and you can actually make more meaningful connections this way than attempting to make very surface level connections by handing them a business card when you actually do go to a large event. So I very much challenge everyone to shift that mindset, because it is truly a mindset that you have to work in an office. Those days are pretty much done. So it's a matter of figuring out, what does it look like today? And aside from the distributed.blog, where you understand how a distributed workforce works with leadership from founders that have created companies like this, you can learn a lot from them. There's 2 other podcasts that I'm going to give you where you can learn from other professionals. One is an organizational psychologist from Harvard. His name is Adam Grant, and he created the Work Life podcast. Highly recommend that, to understand the psyche of, do you really need to be in person? He figured out that no, honestly, all you need is not even the video. You don't even need the video what do you need to have a conversation and to convey a message, regardless of what that conversation is, or what that message is, whether it's I love you, or I need money, or I need you to do this, or what do I need to do next? Whatever that conversation is the clarity in your message and the right tone. That's it. No video. You don't need to see a talking head moving around like a newscaster. All you need is the right tone and clarity in your message. And that's all you need. If you understand and break that down to the simplest elements, just like I did, you can get your message and your communication done, whether you're talking to one person or 5,000, it doesn't matter. And then the other challenge, the other resource I'm going to give you is remoteworklife.io is another podcast. So remoteworklife.io. He's another podcaster who's been interviewing a lot of managers and leadership to understand, how do you manage today? Not just lead and not just create a company that's distributed, but manage, because now you're not counting butts and seats anymore. That doesn't count for anything anymore, right? And it's not a matter of, well, did you work an 8-hour day and punch your clock, right? Then until the whistle blows. It's like, well, those days are over too. It's a matter of getting the output done, right? Right. It's still about results, right? It's still about communication. Now it's more about communication. Sorry. It's more about communication. It's about getting things done and getting more focused work done too, because unless you're in constant meetings and managing those constrained time frames of when you should have meetings and when you should have focused time to actually get work done, because during meetings, you may not getting any work done because you may be listening to someone babbling, which isn't going to be helpful to anybody, right?
So yeah, again, so appreciate it, and I'll share the podcast. I'll get those URLs and we'll share those, for sure. As you were talking though, is that it sounds absolutely like a mindset. Is that I need to be personal, and a lot of people even using. I'm a fan of using the profiles. Obviously, that's my business assessments, and a lot of people are familiar with DISC, which is DISC. So, and it's basically, for those who aren't familiar with it, you've probably done it at some point, either by colors or by shapes or by animals or whatever. But the model behind it was really about communication. It didn't mean you were good or bad at anything. And it's sort of stereotype, and people took it to the extreme. But it basically said it was based on how you communicated, and that going back to the old version of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, not natural language processing. We're old enough to remember the old NLP, right? It is that somewhere between 50 and 60% of communication was based on body language. So you can read somebody's walking down the street, and you can see if they're angry, they're happy, they're smiling, they're uptight, they're animated. You can sense that. And then about 30 to 40%, depending on which philosophy you believe in, was tone, pace. And then 10% was the words you use. And the first thing we always grew up with was that everybody says, be careful with the words you choose. And in reality, because we were trained to rely so much on body language and tone and pace, that we ignored the words we used. And people could say whatever they want, and you got away with it. Some people could. We've now, what you were basically saying is, okay, people, we took away that body language, which people are uncomfortable. So we've been trained for decades and years, our lifetime anyway, on how to communicate face to face, because I can read your body language. All that shows is that we have a serious weakness. We are horrible active listeners.
Totally.
And
still,
and the other day I had somebody, Cheryl Cran, who talks about that, and we talked about Oscar Trimboli, who's an Australian. I've interviewed him. He's got a program called Deep Listening. He's one of the best. I mean, I highly recommend looking up Oscar Trimboli, but he's got a program called Deep Listening, and this is what he studies. This is what he does, and it's absolutely profound. Because only 2% of people, I think, ever take a listening course. We just learned how to do it, but we didn't learn how to listen. We learned how to observe. And what this has done is taken that element out of there. And it's saying, hey, we need a new skill. We need to learn how to become better listeners. And you're so right that people say, oh, I'm so tired of being on Zoom all day long. Well, in the past, you did a lot of phone calls. And just because you took the easy way out and you had this meeting, you weren't paying attention the whole time. You were checking your phone. You were listening to other things. You were distracted. You know, the meetings were rushed. So hopefully now people will become more focused. And I've seen that. I did a conference, and I might have shared this when you and I talked a few weeks ago. I did a conference it was like the first big virtual conference, and there was several hundred people on the call. And I was supposed to be in Orlando, which would have been a fun place to be. Instead, we were doing on screen. And last year I did 27 conferences. Huh? I had more interaction, more responses, more connections, more people purchased my book, which is not the ultimate version of how successful you are, except if you're a consultant, then at least you resonated with people. Mm-hmm. More people contacted me afterwards. More people inquired about an online course I had that followed that. There was more interaction from one 50-minute online session than I had from 27 in person. And people ask me why I thought that was. Well, if you're in a meeting, we say, now you don't say take your shot. You said, as long as you're only texting and tweeting about my session, that's okay to use your phone, but you can't check your messages, your emails, or do anything else. What I found was the chat line was incredibly interactive. What I recognized, people said, what did he say? I missed that. And other people were engaging and participating and helping other people out. And then the moderator would say, hey, stop, there was a question. Can you repeat that? That never happens in a live conference. So the impact that people were actually listening, paying attention, engaging with other people, having this sideline conversation while they were still paying attention because they were looking at slides. So it wasn't that they couldn't be distracted. I thought was, it was an amazing outcome. Now it was just, I've had several others. I did one other was as good as that one. I did one last week to a group. I know the group, I won't say they're the most digitally savvy group. They are a social group, and that's how their meetings are. And there wasn't a lot of interaction on it, but I think, again, it was because people weren't comfortable with that medium. But the people who are going to survive are going to have to be comfortable with it. Going back to my other question and sort of laying this back, and it goes back to that comment I had about workplace and geography, and as you said, the space. There's still this mindset that people are saying, I can't wait to go back to work and see my people. I'm so tired of being crammed up at home with my, with the kids and my spouse and partner or whatever it is. And we're all kind of using the same, tabletop and kitchen table to do all this and bandwidth. I mean, the other underestimation from people of going back to work, as you said, is one, it's the commute. Okay. And for a while, commute times are going to be okay because there's not going to be that many people on the road for a while. But once they get there, and now you get to the physical space, and there is a line going out of the building, 6 feet apart, everybody with masks, trying to get into the building because temperatures are being taken, then trying to go onto an elevator. So while you had 15 people in an elevator going up to the 47th floor, you now have 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I don't know if I posed this for you before, but I think, at least this is my impression, and if I'm right or tell me I'm wrong, it is that the baseline for productivity that companies are saying, we need everybody back here to be able to get things done. But once they get back there, I think that's going to be shattered. It's going to take, it takes people 2 hours to get in. It takes me an hour to commute and 2 hours to get into the building. When I go out for lunch, I got to repeat the whole cycle. I got to stand in line on the street in the rain, waiting in line to get into the deli down the street or to get a cup of coffee. And then this, I think it's just going to take so much longer. It's going to be people saying, screw this. It's not very productive going back to work.
Yeah. They'll either figure it out in their mind, or if they don't have any imagination, they'll figure it out the hard way. And then if all else fails, they'll completely disregard all of the safety precautions, and then they'll figure out, oh, I'm back to quote unquote normal, and is this an improvement over what happened the last few months? And the likelihood is no.
Right. Yeah.
But again, it's mindset, right? It's like, oh, I have to get back to the office. I miss my people so much. It's like,
so if everybody has the grocery experience, of going to the grocery store and go, oh crap, there's a line outside. We're getting checked. And I know some, are stricter than others, and
Sure.
Maybe it's going to be over this summer. We'll have a reprieve, and then we're going to go into these hot spots. But whatever it is, I mean, multiply that over and over again. And it has taken longer to go through a grocery store. I used to be able to run in, we'd go to the gym, and it was 8:15 at night, and I'd say, oh, we have to run into Sam's, and I would know where everything is, and I'd run in and run out. There's no way you can possibly do that anymore. One is half the products aren't even there, so you can have
that's true. Yeah, it's like, oh, you wanted toilet paper? Oh, we don't have that today.
Right. So even running in and coming out, even if it was possible to make that tour around there, is going to be challenging. But I don't think anybody's anticipating what it's like to really go back. Other than people that tried it, and people say, "Oh yeah, I've been going back," but there's nobody there. I mean, you don't have to fight the elevator, you don't have to fight the traffic, you don't have to fight the parking. We're like 70 miles from the city, from New York, and
right.
We'd go in for dinner and a show. And thinking through all that process, even without staying overnight, which, we did often, it's like, do we want to do it? When do we want to do it? How do we want to do it? We had Broadway ticket show that they keep postponing. Now they're talking about June. They just rescheduled one we had for April. But even then, it's like, is it going to be safe? How are they going to do that? What's the distancing? Because in the theater, you're, if you were over 180 pounds and 5'8", those seats were tight. Those were small. Yeah, for sure. So what I know we're up about just about 30 minutes here. What is so kind of looking ahead? I mean, I sense you agree with that 70, pretty close to 70% of people are going to be remote. Yeah.
Likelihood. Yeah.
So I know you work with, your industry is primarily, or companies that come to you are interested in going virtual or going remote. I mean, that's sort of right in digital asset management, and most of the people that work in there. I mean, what's your advice to, if a client called you and said, we're curious, I mean, we hear you, we want to do this, but we have no clue where to start.
Got it. Yeah. Well, first start with surveying your employees, I would say, number one, and understand what their needs are, right? And understand what their roles are, right? Are they basically zero opportunity for remote work, or is it, and on distributed.blog, they have a scale, I think it's 0 to 5, if I remember correctly, of how far into remote work can you be? Can you be at optimal, level of remote work, or just tertiary? Supposedly, most of us are around a 2 right now, in level 2, because we are required to, and maybe that will really relax in the coming whatever period of time, right? And maybe we'll have to return, right? And maybe we don't want to return. is the other question, right? So I would say start with a survey. Then I would say, do you have a remote work policy for your work, right? In general, meaning how do you follow regulations with, the connection that you use, right? So that you have a secure connection, especially with whatever information you might have, or the equipment that you might be issued or using, right? Hopefully you're issued equipment, so it's nice and secure and meets the guidelines of said organization, right? So you have potentially a headset and a laptop issued to you, or some kind of device that will work to communicate with the same tool set that everyone needs to, communicate, whether it's, the Microsoft or Google or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And everyone has the same tool set available to them. So having the right tools, having the right access levels necessary for their role in their positions, surveying them, having a policy for remote work, and it doesn't mean just work from home, right? So once we're relaxed and you're allowed to, say, travel beyond, say, your backyard, if you have one, right? Where can you work remotely, right? Can you work in a Starbucks? Can you work in a coffee shop? Well, obviously, if I'm doing my taxes, I probably don't want to do my taxes in the middle of a Starbucks, right? Just like you probably don't want to do it with sensitive company equipment or sensitive company information, right? So understanding those parameters and those regulations and that policy that you need to set. When I surveyed people about this, only half of the companies had a remote work policy. Half. And by today's standard, you would think all of them have developed one, right? But if you haven't already, and even if you're thinking of going back to work, you should still have one, because you don't know when you'll need to go back to not working in the office again. All right. So all the more reason to work from home as much as possible, and then work remotely when you want a change of pace, right? So I work outside of my home when I can, when I have a decent internet connection. Really, all I need is a decent internet connection and not enough noise that I can hear myself speak or hear myself think. Kind of important, because you can't do that in a busy restaurant if those exist anymore. So understand what those needs are for your employees and your employers, right? Because they have a bit of fear on both ends, right? Of going back, and what are you going to do with that real estate office, right? Of that workspace, and do we need as much? And then, what does parking look like, right? What does commuting look like? What does taking an elevator look like? What is checking in and getting your temperature, or potentially some kind of testing before you go into the office, so you don't infect everyone else? Is that even worth it, right? Because it's not free, obviously. And so those are the few things that I would suggest looking at first.
Yeah, great advice, and I appreciate that. You and I can go on forever with this. I do want to share this with everybody. I'm just going to flash through it. Yep. Okay. There was a remote workbook, employee blueprint. Honestly, I mean, I put this together with a couple other people. It's pretty superficial. It's the basics. Distributed.blog, as you said, with Matt Mullenweg. I looked up there. He had some great tips, and I go, I wish I would have included that. And a lot of things are evolving too. But if anybody just wants a quick start, I will tell you, there's no miracles in this thing. No. It's not the end all and be all, but it was basically, if you want a lot of information in a concise, document, it's there. But I know you have a lot of other resources, and some of them that you mentioned, but I'll let that keep running there while we're on there. If people want to get in touch with you, Henrik, how can they do that? What's the best way? Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to henrikdegyor.com. There you can schedule time with me. You can find all my books, my podcasts, blogs, what I'm doing on a regular basis. You can find all my books on Amazon if you're curious. I've written about 7 books in 3 years, and considering writing another one in the near future.
A lot of things to write about it, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you so much. I appreciate all your time here, and thanks again for putting all this information together for everyone too.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, and appreciate, and we'll continue this conversation for sure. It's just the start. I heard this earlier this morning. They said life is now like a diamond, and we're literally on one small facet of it. And there's a lot of other things, and it keeps evolving. So it'll be fascinating. So I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thanks for sharing all that. Just a reminder, in about an hour and a half, let me throw that back up there. We're going to have the employability webinar, and we're talking about what that's going to look like in the future, especially job skills and retraining with everybody. There's still a few seats left. You can go up there. Dr. Ed Gordon will be joining me, and we'll be talking about the future of work, future skills, and basically, even if people are working remote at home, not even if, but when they work remote, they're going to need a whole different set of skills, and starting with active listening. That's one, not a technical skill, but basically a personal skill. So appreciate it very much. Hey, thanks for everybody who was watching, or in the future, everybody who will watch this. And please stay in touch with both of us. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Ed.